Right. Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. I'm Councillor Barry Pierpoint. I'm the chairman of this committee, and my vice chairman is Councillor Anton Daly, to my right. We'll move to the part one of the agenda, the preliminaries. Are there any apologies?
There are 3 this evening, Chairman, from Councillors Ariane, Beth, Mountain and Scoot.
Thank you. Have I got the committee's permission to sign the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you. Very kind of you. Do any members wish to declare any interest in respect of any items on the agenda? Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the member of the public?
There are none, Chairman.
Thank you. That concludes the preliminaries. We'll now move to part 2 of the agenda items. Item 1 on the agenda this evening is the Q1 Risk Management Report, which starts on page 7 of the agenda pack. And Councillor Andorian would like to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to emphasise the importance of risk management and your role in that. And if you want to understand why this is so important, you only have to look at places like Birmingham, who recently issued a Section 114 notice. And it's hard to know how something as dire as that was allowed to happen, Mr. Chair, especially if their audit and governance were doing their job, if their senior management team were doing their job properly, etc., etc. So it is a very big responsibility, and one that I'm pleased that this council takes very seriously. The report is there, and I'm sure you've all read it. And all I want to do this evening is to highlight the 2 additional risks that have been added to the register. This has already been presented to you before, but the 2 new risks are located on page 14 of the document. Over and above the risks that were already annotated, and they're around the implementation of the Environment Act. And of course, that new legislation, Mr. Chair, will have a significant impact on local councils in the way they collect their waste. We do believe that the government might choose not to enact that new act until after the general election. That's certainly a feeling amongst local government officers, but we do need to keep a close eye on that, because it could have a very, very big impact on this council. And the second new risk is the introduction of extended producer responsibility, and that's to do with the disposal of waste, recycling and packaging items. I cannot speak fluently on that one at all, and I would delegate that to Suzanne, if she wouldn't mind, if people want to know more about it. But I would just like to thank your committee for your oversight on what this council's doing, because I think it's remarkably important. So that's the report. I won't hold you up any longer, and if anyone's got any questions, I'll try and answer them, but obviously Suzanne's there to help me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's take questions first. Any questions for Councillor Andorian, please? Councillor James Cantwell.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to ask, under point 1 on page 8 of the agenda pack, could you elaborate further on this corporate governance clinic? Is the results of those meetings, are they fed back to you, the minutes at all?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I have regular meetings with Suzanne and also with the senior leadership team. So if there were any issues that were raised at an SLT meeting that they felt I had to be cited on, then I have full confidence that they would do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for? Okay.
Thank you. Just one final one. I was hoping I could get an answer, but under risk 1 on the risk register, economic hardship, it mentions that political pressure was undertaken. And I was hoping I could get clarification of what this political pressure is, because I don't think that was fully explained at the last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, where are you reading political pressure, Councillor Cartwell?
So under the strategic risk register, risk number 1, economic hardship.
What page number are you on, please?
So it's page 11.
Thank you.
I found it, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's on, just to help people, it's on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th box along under mitigation, existing control measures. So I think it's fair to say that councils would regularly engage with government, and I myself have met with the MP to bring pressure to bear on all the issues that affect local people, and especially when we're talking about the poorest in our society. I'm sure you'd agree, Councillor Cantwell, that the fear of the fuel bills rising again this winter is a very real fear, and one that is very, very difficult for people to manage who are on low incomes. So I've certainly brought that political pressure to bear. I'm not aware of the previous administration and what they might have done. But I can assure you that that's something that we're very aware of and will continue to keep doing. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Gilbert.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple of comments to make. Under the, well, on a number of the areas on the strategic risk register, but specifically in relation to health, number 2. I wonder whether any consideration has been given to the fact that we have had a significant change in the overall demographics within the town centre itself. And I'm not talking about the broader borough, I'm talking about the town centre. So we've got a lot of HMOs, we've got a lot of people coming from places like Romania and Bulgaria. And just anecdotally, that they seem to have different health expectations to what you might describe as the indigenous population. And I just wonder whether or not we either do or whether we should actually sort of look at health outcomes in relation to that very specific population in terms of smoking and in terms of drinking, because at the moment it looks to me as though those 2 issues are being largely overlooked, and I don't think they should be. Secondly, I'm also aware, and it relates to sort of general poverty, that dentistry in this town is in a very poor state of disrepair, and NHS services are in retreat. I'm aware of a number of people who fall into what you might call the lower income bracket, who are struggling to get dentists, and I wonder whether or not under the health heading we need to include dentistry as a sort of a subheading or something like that.
Thank you very much. Shall I pass that to you, Councillor Durham?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just to address that last point first, certainly when I was in opposition, Councillor Gilbert, I raised the issue of dentistry, and in particular, the poor dental health of our primary school-age children. It's absolutely dreadful, and there is well documented data and evidence around that. I raised that with the previous administration. Sadly, they didn't really want to know. However, it's something I haven't addressed thus far in the new administration, but it's something that I do intend to pick up again. To your other point about addressing the particular social habits of a demographic that you've highlighted, that is Romanian Bulgarian residents, I don't really understand why you would pick those out for their smoking and drinking habits. I would need to see further data on that, whether, and I don't know if you're speaking anecdotally or you have seen data that would suggest they're any worse than as you described, indigenous residents. I'm not so sure, Mr. Chairman, that that would be the right approach. I think our general approach around healthy living should be taken for everyone that lives within our borough. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Gilbert.
But I did say it was anecdotal, and I did say that it's comments that have been made to me, and that what I've seen when I've been, and I live at the town centre, so when I walk around the town centre, I just think that, we need to be mindful of the fact that a lot of our newly arrived communities don't come from communities or countries with an advanced sort of health service in the way that we have, and therefore their expectations and their sort of their normal daily behaviour around substances like alcohol and smoking could markedly differ from ours. And I just think we should, look to collect data on that, liaising with partners in the NHS and elsewhere, so that we get a real sense of, what the health issues are of our newly arrived communities, whichever communities they might actually be. It's not just one.
I think Councillor Dorian said a moment ago that the new administrations, it's on their agenda, but actually haven't got round to dealing with it. They've had so many other things to sort of deal with. Yeah, there's dentistry, there's health, and there's a lot of. It's a very wide issue, and it's a very wide topic. And I think there's a big agenda there that needs to be looked into, and I think that's on the new administration's list of things to do, I believe.
Thank you. Yeah, to your point there, Councillor Gilbert, I'm not going to enact anything on instruct officers on anybody's anecdotal evidence. I would support, and we're not going to collect health data, I can assure you of that. That's not our function. I would support the NHS as they collect health data, and work with them in partnership. But that's not our responsibility. And as to your other point about immigrant families or migrant families not coming from countries where they have good healthcare, I know of Polish residents, Lithuanian residents, Latvian residents who choose to return to their home countries for dental treatment and for general health treatment, because they get it much speedier and to a very significantly high degree of service. So I think you're drilling down into perhaps specific groups such as Bulgarians and Romanians again. I don't have enough data. I will work on evidence on that. Thank you, Mr.
I think that topic's been fairly aired now, so we'll move on. Councillor Gleeson.
So not a question for the leader, just a question on how we are scoring item 1 on page 11. We have the likelihood at 3, which is possible. Well, I think it's a lot more than possible. I think it's actually here already, so that should be at least a 4 or a 5. I don't think economic harm on our community is a possible at all. I mean, it is happening every day.
Thank you for your comment there. Do you want to take that, Susan?
Yeah, we'll review that. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Gilbert. I would say, thank you for the comment. I would say that Suzanne monitors this very carefully and very closely. And I'm sure if we went around the room now and asked everybody to put numbers at the side of it, we'll all come up with different answers. So I think we've got to be guided by our officer. And, we can change numbers up and down the track as much as we want to. But I'd like to take, I know it's not. And I'm just like to say that, if we went around the room now, we'd all get different numbers. Can you just reply back to Councillor Gilbert for me?
Yes, we will pick that up in the review. So it is helpful to get that feedback so that we can go through that. But I think if my memory serves me right, the Q1 figure for occupancy for markets was the highest that it had been recently. So, but we'll look at all of the data and feed that into that particular risk. Thank you.
Are there any more questions on that report that Councillor Dorring gave us, or can we move on? There's one thing I'd just like to ask you, Suzanne. If people have got other thoughts that might be for risk management and the risk list, can they pass them to you? Could discuss them with you? Because, you know, risk can be quite wide, really, isn't it? You know, risk management. So are you open for other ideas and suggestions?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to email me or ring with your suggestions, and we are working on the risk policy at the moment. So when that's ready, we'll come back to committee either as part of a meeting or outside of the meeting to do some training on that. And that might help to discuss the risks in detail at that point.
One thing I'd just like to say very quickly before we move on, you talked about, Councillor Gilbert, about the town centre. I have to say the enthusiasm, the dedication and the hard work of Councillor Broughton on the town centre and what he is doing to revive it, to improve it, to develop it, is gone beyond anybody's mind, because he's really so enthusiastic and passionate about getting this town centre back to where it should be years ago. And if you sit and listen to him in some of the meetings and all the workload he's dealing with on that issue and topic, I have to congratulate him what he's done so far in a very short space of time. Thank you. Right, let's move on then. So thank you for that conclusion. Sorry, no, on the agenda we've done that. Thank you. I'll now open the meeting for comments and questions. We've just done that, haven't we? I'm losing my place here. I'm getting so excited with this meeting. I'm losing my place. Right, we're being asked to simply note the report. Is everybody happy to take that as noted? Yes, all in favour? Item 2 on the agenda is the Q1 Treasury Management Update. Thank you, Suzanne. On page 19 of the agenda, I'll ask Sean now to present the report. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you very much. Yes, the Q1 Treasury report, the overarching report starts on page 19, but I propose to go to the appendix, which provides the more detailed information, which starts on page 25 and 26. This is the Q1 report for the period ending 30th of June. CIPFA Code of Practice recommends that quarterly reports are received, and the Governance and Audit Committee, Audit and Governance Committee, are the delegated body for receiving Treasury Management reports. Paragraph 2 is quite detailed and provides an economic update of the situation in the markets and the economies globally and in the UK. And this is provided by a link group for the first quarter of the financial year. I don't propose to go through that in detail, but the key points are that inflation remains stubbornly high at 8.7%. Earnings growth has gone up to 6.5%, earnings growth being the pay rises, and interest rates rising from 4.25% to 5% in the quarter. Section 3 refers to interest rate forecasts, again provided by Link Group, our external Treasury advisors. And you'll see on the first table their forecasts for the bank base rate. And you'll see September 2023, their expectation was that base rate would be at 5.5%. And that is the peak, in their opinion. And then it drops all the way down to 2.5% by June 2026. So it's a gradual reduction all the way through 3 years ahead. Section 4 refers to the Council's annual investment strategy. And I'll just get to that section, please. That sets out the Council's priorities as security, liquidity and yield in that order. And the investment, I can confirm that investments have been made throughout the year in accordance with that approved strategy. The table on the top of page 35 shows the investments that the council hold as at 30th of June. And you'll see that at the top of the page shows the instant access cash that's available, just over £7.6 million. And then the investments that have been made, which are time deposits over varying maturities, Short-term cash is at variable rates and the time deposits tend to be at fixed rate. And you'll see there that the rates vary from 4.78% all the way up to 6.35% for the longer investments. The HSBC 600,000 deposit there at 0.5, that is held on call and is available at very short notice. The following table after that refers to the council's property funds. And you'll see there the first table is the breakdown of the cost of those property funds, which the original purchase price total £17.7 million. The second table shows the current valuation of those property funds. That's the landscape page on page 37. And you'll see there the brought forward position of the purchase cost of 17.7 million. And you'll see on the fourth column, third column, the net asset value at 30th June was just over 16 million. So overall, a reduction in value of just over 1.6 million pounds at the 30th of June. That is at this point in time. And obviously, as the property markets increase in prosper and start to increase in value, then obviously those valuations will increase. But if the markets continue to fall, those valuations tend to fall. But at the time the investments were made, these were long-term investments, and there was the expectation that markets and fair values would fluctuate over time. Following table after that refers to the analysis of the distributions that we have received from the property funds. Prior to the current financial year, the net distributions received was just over £3.3 million. The original profiled budget for the first quarter for this year of 160,000 and the actual distributions of 178,000, so £18,000 higher than we expected. So that gives total net distributions of £3.5 million since purchase. The following table after that on the bottom of page 38 shows the maturity profile of the council's investments, split from 1 week through varying monthly periods to over 12 months, which is your property funds. Total investments of £51.3 million. And then the more interesting table at the top of the next page shows the overall position on your investments for your budget. So your Q1 budget split for treasury investments of £203,383, and then your property funds showing gross less management fees and net of 160,000, giving total net income budget of 363,500. And the next column shows the Q1 actual, and you'll see from that the overall position is £436,400, so approximately 70,000 ahead of budget. And it also gives a forecast outturn in relation to the overall budget for the financial year, whereby for the year you've got a budget of just over £1.4 million, and the current forecast at Q1 for the outturn position was going to be just over £2 million. Investments received in treasury investments made an average rate of 4.4% against the council's benchmark, which is the 3-month sterling overnight rate of 4.65%, and property funds have made an average rate of 4.02%, giving a combined return of 4.26%. Paragraph 5 refers to the council's borrowing position, where it has just over 15.5 or just under £15.5 million worth of borrowing with the PWLB at an average rate of 2.475%. That is at a fixed rate, so the borrowing costs on that for the year will be £382,388, assuming the borrowing remains throughout the year. In addition to that, there's £1 million borrowing from State Street, which is a LOBO, and that again is at a fixed rate at the moment with the option to vary at the lender's option, and the borrowing costs on that is forecast to be £111,000. Paragraph 6 refers to debt rescheduling. There hasn't been any debt rescheduling to report, so that's a very brief section. And paragraph 7 refers to council's compliance with Treasury and prudential indicators. I can confirm we've not breached any of the strategy for investments. We've complied with that strategy. And Appendix A1, the tables that follow on page 41, This is a new requirement under the Code of Practice, whereby we have to report on a quarterly basis the Treasury indicators and the prudential indicators, which were fixed as part of the budget setting report. And those are the valuations and the changes to those where there are any. There isn't any note to report. You'll see there that the authorised limit remains at 28 million, and the operational boundary 25 million. Prudential indicators there on the second part of the table refers to the council's capital expenditure, and there is a breakdown on paragraph appendix A2, which provides a detailed analysis of the capital programme and the position as at Q1 expenditure on each individual project. I'm not aware of all the details behind those, so if there are any questions, I would have to take those back and get the answers for you, because it's not the area that I tend to deal with. And in relation to that capital programme, the final table on page 43 shows how that capital programme is being financed. That concludes the report. The recommendation is that members receive and review the contents of the report, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Sean. Very kind of you. A very thorough, detailed report. Thank you. Over to Christine.
Thank you, Chairman. So just a few points I wish to add. Firstly, this is one of your more technical areas. It's quite a highly regulated area, and the responsibility for undertaking the Treasury Management Strategy is delegated to the Section 151. So I effectively work with the Treasury team within PSPS to ensure that your funds are deployed within the context of the strategy that full council sets every year. And there are a lot of changes that are particularly coming up. And in that vein, I've asked Sean to arrange some training in this area that Link will be providing to you, because we are expecting some new changes to regulations imminently, which could impact on your Treasury management holdings. A lot of this has been driven by tightening of government, particularly around more novel areas of borrowing and investments that you may have seen mentioned in the press. There's been a lot of tightening up over the years. The potential indicators were part of that, but I think the assessment is that that has not gone far enough and more tightening is required. So we await those regulations, but in the meantime, we'll get that training undertaken, and then we've got further work in train to support you to get up to speed on certain technical areas. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Christine. Are there any questions? We'll straight to open now for any questions.
A hugely sort of technical, numerate person, but it sounds like in terms of the money we have available to invest in capital programs, that's gone up. But there's been some pressure on us in respect of our investment portfolios, which I guess align with general pressures that there are in the economy at large. In specific reference to BlackRock, how exposed is that to the commercial property market or the commercial property sector? Because it feels to me like it's the one area of the economy where there probably will be a continuance of pressure going forward. We're seeing what's happening in Boston with commercial property, and I just wonder how exposed the council is in relation to the commercial property sector in respect of our BlackRock property fund.
Yes, each property fund manager manages their portfolios in different ways. Some manage them very conservatively, and some, and that's not necessarily the ones that we are invested with. But what they do is they look at the markets, they look at the areas, the demographics, and try and decide where they want to invest. Obviously, it's all within the UK because we've not gone for global investments. But the types of investments they will be investing in is various areas: retail, commercial warehousing, office spaces. One key area that they tend to look at as well is student accommodation, which is quite lucrative at the moment. And as and when the markets and valuations in those sectors start to look as though they may be getting a little bit heated, what they tend to do is they revisit those portfolios and decide whether they want to realign that portfolio and the spread between various types of assets. So they do tend to manage it and review it on a regular basis. All the property fund managers have good governance arrangements and committees whereby this sort of thing is regularly reviewed.
Thank you. Councillor Cantwell.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to ask, considering the changes that you've just mentioned, how are we ensuring that the council is compliant with the financial relations, and how will we ensure that we're compliant in the future with these new changes? Is it something we need to worry about, or is it something the officers are worrying about?
I don't think you need to worry about us being compliant. That's what your auditor, your external auditors particularly, give a lot of attention to this area in terms of their focus. However, I would say to you, your team is committed to making sure we're ahead of those changes, and we don't get caught by them effectively with some occasionally what can be unintended consequences of changes. So we actually started looking at this area a year ago when there was an initial consultation document out from government on potential changes to MRP. We started taking advice at that particular point in time. And we've been keeping our ear very much to the ground to find out when those regulations are going to be out again for consultation. And we've been told it's imminent. So I'd say to you that we are making sure you are ahead of it, and that we are all as we need to be in terms of procedures and processes and indicators, etc. So you've got a good team, a Treasury team looking after this, and we're making sure we are compliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a query. I hope it's for the people here to answer. I'm interested, like Councillor Gilbert, to know how the businesses in Boston Town Centre and in the industrial estates are faring. Are we seeing a reduction or an increase in failure to pay the business rates, or are we keeping on target with that? I would think that companies that are struggling, that must be one of the first things that they don't pay.
Strictly speaking, this is a question for scrutiny or perhaps for cabinet. But what I would say is we are monitoring that very closely. I think it is fair to say that businesses are finding it very difficult and they've had to reinvent themselves. We have seen contraction in your yield, and it is an area that we're keeping a very close eye on in terms of future development opportunities. Obviously, bringing forward sites for economic development is really important because that boosts your business rates, but it also boosts employment opportunities and development opportunities for business. So your economic development team are very focused on that and aware of that. But it is one area where we are keeping a very close eye. So I think your concerns are well founded, and we're not the only place in the country where things are still adjusting post-COVID.
Thank you, Christine. I would like to say, and I appreciate that the question wasn't for this meeting, but we've got people here. We don't know the guidelines sometimes of where we start and where we finish on these questions. So you have to bear with us on that point. And I think at the moment, when we've got a document like this, which is very complex and quite deep, I think anybody asking any questions should come forward, because the more questions we ask of the officers, the more answers we're going to find out, what's inside these documents if we're not quite sure. So please don't be frightened to ask any questions. As far as I'm concerned, that's what we're here for. We're here to ask questions. There's no silly question in this house, so let's just ask the questions. I'm sorry if you think it was out of order, and it isn't out of order in that sort of respect. But I'm a great believer in let's getting people speaking and let's find out what's in this document, because some people don't always understand. Thank you for that question, Councillor Middleton. Thank you. Right, Councillor Austin.
In view of the very high-profile problems of Birmingham paying equal pay, I don't think we have got any issues here, but it'd be interesting to know the history here of the equal pay issue.
Is that one a question for this meeting or is it a question for another meeting?
Well, if it was a risk, it would be on your risk register.
Put it down as
So
a
it-
risk.
so it's relevant to, and again, as you're a new committee, we'll go through the process of familiarising you with what's scrutiny and what's governance, and we can perhaps pick that up at one of the. It is one that takes time, and it often strays into that sort of area. So you have a job evaluation system here, and that was implemented some years ago. So that's a defendable position in terms of, you know, if somebody had a concern around equal pay, that's what job evaluation is there to do, is to look at equality across bandings and pay bandings, etc. So you have that system, it's in place, and it's been successfully functioning for many years.
Thank you very much. I have to say, we've had 2 hours training amongst all of us when we first started. We're not going to be accountants in 2 hours. So the questions you're asking are important, and sometimes not for this meeting, but we have to ask the questions. Eventually, we'll get the boundary lines when we're in and out of the committee. Any more questions? Councillor Gleeson.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, if you'll bear with me, I'm a bare little brain and I've always had trouble understanding capitalism. So
We'll bear with you, Councillor
well, I think we
Gleeson.
might have here, but I'm trying to work it out. So the property portfolio we hold. So I just want to check my understanding is right. So the government, in the attempt to move risk to us, lent us money cheap. We use that cheap money to invest in property. And the theory is we pay the government less in interest than we see from the property. Yeah. And so are we doing that? That's what I'm trying to, so, are we actually seeing more money coming in than we're paying out? I accept, I'm not bothered about the depreciation. We've had COVIDs and this is a 30-year investment. So, that's, I think is for longer times. But, are we basically making money out of this or not? Thank you.
Is it Sean or is it Christine? Over to you, Sean.
Thank you. Yes, when the decision was made, obviously the first decision is to commit to the capital expenditure, which the decision was made, and then the decision was made as to how to finance that, and the decision was made not to use existing resources but to use it by way of borrowing. So what you can do there is you either internally borrow or you can externally borrow. The borrowing rates with the PWLB at that time were extremely low due to base rates being around 0.25%. So the decision at that time was taken to externally borrow at a fixed rate for the 50-year period, bearing in mind that the view was that the investment would be for a long term. The average rate on that borrowing was 2.465%. And at the current stage, the returns that you are receiving on those investments, those property fund investments, are at the moment around 4%. So you are getting an overall net gain to your revenue position.
Thank you. Any more questions? Do you want to ask a question? Can you do a question from the public? Yeah, or it is the councillor. Come to the table, Councillor Winliff, and you can raise a question. I'm just making sure I'm in the right sort of ballpark to let you do it. I think we'll get a green light. Thank you.
I was going to read it off, but I can't. So unfortunately, the computer's taken it off. My question is really about, I think it's one of the pages points out that core inflation is increasing. Wage inflation and core inflation. I think figures were given for June. Might have slightly changed by now. But how are we protected? Because of course we're limited in what we can charge for council tax. So our income essentially is restricted. So how are we protected against this continued rise in inflation? Wage inflation, I believe it's pointed out. Watch it off my screen, so I haven't got the paper, but it's how are we protected against that? Because that's the long-term threat against us, isn't it? That if inflation continues to rise, our income is restricted because we are limited to 2% increase in council tax. So how are we going to hold our corner if inflation continues as it is? And it's wage inflation and it is core inflation, isn't it? I think you probably picked it up because it's disappeared from my screen. As soon as I walked over here, it just disappeared. But that's computers, isn't it?
I should have brought the microphone to you. Just hold you. I'll ask Christine to respond to that question. Thank you.
So you're absolutely right. We cannot recover necessarily all of that inflationary pressure that's coming into the system, because even if you have a statutory service that's ring fenced, like for example, building control or licensing, you can only put it up in relation to that service area. You can't apply it across the whole council, and obviously the inflation is affecting the whole council, not just little segments of it. So it effectively puts more financial pressure into your budget, and ever is the challenge of the 151 at the moment in terms of helping councils to balance their budgets when you have a lot of inflationary pressure in the system. What we did last year, because some of the big areas were pay, fuel and power, was we built in those increases, but at the same time built in efficiency targets. Now, what's happened, fortunately, on some of those, as you'll see from the Q1 report, is those budgets, when they were set, were a little bit on the high side. We didn't know that at the time when we set them. So we're now adjusting that against that efficiency target and pulling it back in again. So in an inflationary, constant changing environment, you're having to flex constantly depending on what's happening with interest rates and what's happening with inflation and what's happening with your contracts. The next big thing will be the pay award. So all of those pressures are in the system, and if things are nice and flat, it is arguably easier to budget. When things are constantly shifting, it makes it a much harder target to land a balanced budget safely.
Thank you very much.
I think I'll leave it at that. It's complicated enough without me adding any more to it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christine. Councillor Downing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just come back to what happened with Birmingham. My worry here is we do have our own investors who invest the money on our behalf, so they are more careful and we're watching them basically, so we know what they are doing. Do we have any connection with our investors if they are investing in sorts of these kind of like Birmingham or any asset with other towns? Because we know that some of them, they're already probably halfway administration. Thank you.
So you've got two segments of investment. You've got your cash, where it's invested mainly in top end, high quality parties, counterparties, and those are listed on page 35. So that's where your cash is. They are all high quality, as I said. So they are short term. When we lend cash to a party, we'll also test them against how long we ought to lend to them and how much. So that advice comes back to us from Link, who are our treasury management advisors. So that's your cash. So that's and again, going back to SLY, which is security top, liquidity and yield. Yield is last. So your focus is to make sure that cash comes back. So that is how your treasury management strategy is structured. When you go to the property funds, as we've just seen, M&G is obviously going through a change process at the moment. That is safely coming back, and we had an investment with them, and that is coming back pretty much pound for pound. In terms of your property funds, they invest, you've got to bear in mind, a lot of these property funds are invested in by pension funds. So they are pretty solid investments. Those pension funds not only want to see a return, but they also want to see capital appreciation over the longer term. So they're not, they are £1 billion funds. In some of them we've got a relatively modest, say £4 or £3 million investments. They are anything from £500 million to £1 billion funds, highly regulated, and with professional teams running them. Again, what we can do as part of your training program is actually get some of the fund managers to present, so you can actually hear from them themselves what they've got in their portfolio, which was a question that was asked earlier, how they're managing that post-COVID, because it's actually really interesting to see some of that and how they're continuing to get yield. So they are, they're after secure assets to offer yield opportunity and capital appreciation opportunity to clients.
Thank you, Christine, for a very detailed response there. I have to say that working with Christine and John and all some of the officers on this topic here, very confident of what they're saying, and it does please me to say that we're in good hands. That's how I feel. Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to endorse what Christine just said, I was going to ask to speak to answer Councillor Gilbert and Councillor Danny's point. I've sat on this committee pre-COVID when the property managers came in to present, and I found it extremely beneficial, very enlightening, and I would strongly encourage you to do that, Mr. Chair, because it, you know, it brings it alive for you, really. Thank you.
I'm all for ongoing training, and I think because this is a very complex topic and it's very wide and deep, as I call it, I'm a great believer that we should have lots of training, you know, in good time, so that we can keep gathering more and more and see more to the inside how all this all works. So yes, we're all for that. Thank you very much. Can I just ask a quick question about Link, this company Link Group? Do we pay them a fixed fee, or is it a different fee? How do we pay these people? In what way?
Yes, the contract is with Public Sector Partnership Services, and they provide the service to us in respect of three clients, our three clients: East Lindsey District Council, South Holland Council, and obviously Boston Borough Council. And what that service entails is providing information in relation to the financial institutions, sovereign ratings. They have a counterparty criteria, and that's where they set their assessment as to how long you should invest over differing periods of time based on ratings, for example, from Fitch, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and gives us that advice whereby it would be extremely difficult for us to gain all that information in a very quick and timely manner. They also provide technical expertise in relation to treasury management, in relation to changes in regulations, accounting in relation to financial institutions and instruments, and also general accounting for local authority finance, not just treasury management. And also they will provide training where required to us. Some of that can be, if it's in a specific area, it can be at an additional cost. But generally speaking, they also have strategy meetings with us as well, and provide an overview, get an overview from us as to the financial standings of each council, what their capital expenditures are, and they will provide information in relation to that and things whereby, have you considered this, have we considered that, and so on. And also we have regular strategy meetings with them.
So we're getting value for money. That's what I'm trying to find out.
In my opinion, we are. Yes.
Good. And are we fixed with these people permanently, or do we review them every year and have different a beauty contest with different people? How does it work?
Unfortunately, there is only two external treasury advisor companies to local authorities. There used to be at one stage, I think there used to be 4 or 5, but the other 3 have been swallowed up, and there's only Arling Close and Link Group now, unfortunately.
Okay, I just very concerned about getting value for money when we do things in the council, and making sure that we're not overpaying for underperforming organisations. But you reassured me. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Right. Is there any more questions? Do you want a question?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. Just Sean, because you mentioned the strategic alliance. Can you tell us what's our position comparing to the other two? And the other second question, if one of them fail on their finances, will it affect us in the future?
Maybe a question for Christine.
So in taking the last one first, so you are a sovereign council, so your cash is yours, and your property funds are yours. So if there was any instability in the mix, I think that would be more about its impact on the partnership rather than the authority in its own right. So, you know, I'm not particularly concerned about treasury management in the context of that. It'd be more around reputational issues if there was a particular problem in authority, but that's no different from, you know, again, if we were to be asked whether or not we'd be wished to place cash, sometimes authorities have issued section 114 notices, for example, that is something where these types of issues come up.
A good example on that one was today. I was looking at a 12-month investment with a local authority, didn't have the name. I got the name as London Borough of Croydon. So I just Googled and saw London Borough of Croydon, section 114. So straight away we avoid it. Albeit I would still be of the opinion that we would get the investment back.
Thank you. You want to speak, Councillor Gleeson? Oh, are you speaking to the committee, Councillor? You're making a comment. Thank you. Are there any more questions? Are there any more questions before we move on? No, I think we've actually done that to death today. So thank you very much. So thank you, Sean. Thank you, Councillor Doran, and thank you, Christine. We're asked to simply note this report. Is everybody happy to take this as noted?
Yes.
Good, thank you very much. Right, we're on to item 3 then. The draft procurement strategy presentation starts on page 45 of the agenda. And I'll ask Martin to present to us.
Get that every time. So yeah, started on to page 45. So I'm going to be talking about the procurement strategy today. I've seen a few familiar faces from the scrutiny meeting, but we'll touch on that. The first thing I wanted to mention is, well, what is a procurement strategy and why? So on page 46 is the purpose of a procurement strategy. So there's a couple of pointers here. The first one being, well, it actually just documents how the council runs its procurement function. And secondly, it provides a really clear direction on what procurement activity for the next 3 years is going to look like and how that can be reviewed. So just a brief background of where we're at. So I'm the head of procurement contracts at PSPS, and PSPS procurement contracts team provides a service internally to PSPS, but also externally to the client councils, yourselves included. Our team was set up in October 2022, but we didn't actually begin going live and providing the service to the client councils until April of this year. So the team have been onboarded to standardise the procurement service across the 3 councils whilst delivering an excellent service. In addition to that, in March 2023, the council approved its annual delivery plan, which included a specific action to bring forward procurement strategy for adoption. So this was also a key strand to the South and East Lincolnshire Council's partnership business case, recognising that through joint procurement, which we can touch on later, delivers significant savings. The first strand of the governance process was completed in June and July of this year, and a report went along with the proposed procurement strategy, which can be seen on page 53, went to each respective council scrutiny committees, where positive feedback was received, and 2 minor amendments were made from Boston Borough Council's scrutiny meeting that are now included within the proposed procurement strategy. So moving on to the next slide, which is 48, just a few reasons for adopting the new procurement strategy. So the council actually doesn't currently have a procurement strategy in place. It is deemed best practice for local authorities to have a procurement strategy adopted and implemented. So that's one reason. The next one is, as I've already mentioned, to ensure the council has got a clear procurement strategy for the next 3 years. Moving on, we then want, another reason is to agree an approach to procurement that maximises the savings opportunities. And as I mentioned, one of those options is joint procurement. Another one is to ensure compliance with audit requirements, as some of the partner councils, not Boston, but South Holland and East Lindsey, have had audit recommendations to update their procurement strategies. I mentioned not Boston right now, but if Boston were to be audited pre a strategy, it would be a very likely recommendation to have a strategy adopted and implemented. And then the final reason is to help support key council priorities. So that is things such as sourcing local suppliers, procuring ethically, and procuring in a sustainable manner. So without going into the report line by line, I just wanted to mention a few of the key points from the strategy. So the proposed procurement strategy focuses on key themes from what is called the National Procurement Strategy. And so these are the 3 themes: are showing leadership, behaving commercially, and achieving community benefits. And then these key themes are then broken down into sections, which would then outline the strategy and how we're going to improve and enhance the procurement service. So a few of those examples that I've got on page 49 of the presentation. So the first one is developing and rolling out a basic procurement training program for members to assist with understanding the procurement process and the value that it adds. Another being seeking collaborative procurement opportunities between the 3 client councils. Attending contractor review meetings and assisting with any contractual queries. And a final example is providing efficient and effective information to local suppliers and micro businesses who are interested in supplying goods and services to the council to basically ensure the process is as simple as possible for them. Moving on to the next slide, which is page 50. So a few more of the key points. So one real key point is sustainable procurement, and that's another element within our strategy. So a couple of strategic focuses here include ensuring sustainability and environmental is an agenda item at the beginning of each new procurement project, so that it's being considered for every project, and also actively monitoring suppliers who have proposed commitments within their tender submissions. So say they've said they're going to employ 3 local apprentices for a construction project. We want to make sure that happens. It's not just on the paper. So that's one reason. And then another key element is the ethical procurement, which is what we've mentioned again. So it's just some of those strategic focuses here include monitoring key contracts closely to ensure we've got full visibility of the entire supply chain, to ensure ethical behaviour, modern slavery, etc. And finally, ensuring that officers who should be evaluating tenders sign what is called a declaration of interest form to confirm that they've got no conflict of interest with any of the suppliers who've been bidding. What the strategy also does is it links in with the council's corporate strategies and priorities. And then moving on to page 51, what I wanted to talk about is, I think is quite important, is what I've defined as what is local. And what is proposed currently is it being split into 3 separate strands. The first one being within the boundary of each respective council, so Boston Borough Council. The second being within the boundaries of the partnership. So that would be if we as in Boston Borough Council got a supplier from South Holland District Council, say, that would be within strand 2. And then the third one would be within Lincolnshire or 60 miles from the boundary of one of the councils. So what we'd propose doing is making sure that we analysed and fed back the percentage of local suppliers from both the first strand and the second strand. We would then work on how we would figure out the third strand, because that's a lot of postcode data, etc., that we need to figure out. But the first and second strand would be easy to do for next year. And then, yeah, based on that, any questions? Happy to take any feedback.
Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you very much. I'm one of these people who kind of gets hung up on a word, and then I bang away at it thinking, I don't know, I don't quite agree with how it's been defined or whatever. And the word here is sustainable. I've had numerous, I've been on and off the council for years, and I've heard the word sustainable used in so many different ways, and not actually ways which I would personally define as necessarily reflecting sustainability. Here it's defined in terms of reducing the environmental impact of our supply chain, which of course might have cost implications in terms of the overall contract cost to the council taxpayer. So to what extent is sustainable procurement mitigated by the enhanced or additional costs associated with trying to achieve that sustainable contract?
Yeah, no, thank you. So we're always looking to, it's based on project by project basis. Every project is dealt with differently. So how things work is we have what's called an evaluation process, and what would tend to happen is the sustainability element would be a quality question. And so depending on how the project team felt that the importance of sustainability was on that project, we might weight it 10%, we might weight it 5%. It might not even be included in evaluation at all if there doesn't seem to be any remit for it in said project, if that makes sense.
I mean, just thinking in terms of, I don't know, obviously you could have quite a big contract that has huge commercial financial implications on this council, and obviously if it has an impact on this council, it has an impact on our council taxpayers. So is there any mechanism whereby councillors, I know there's a reference to councillors in here, would have some oversight of what the terms of the sustainable procurement might actually be, so that we could take into consideration whether we thought it tipped over the edge into something that was a little bit more expensive for our council taxpayers than was as affordable? Because environment seems to be the buzzword at the moment, you know, and I'm just conscious that in many ways, you know, the word environmental is like it's an open book. It's a blank check almost.
Answer the question.
So we're always looking for the most economically advantageous bid. We're not always, it's one cog as such, it's one important part, but cost is always important, quality is always important, time, if we need something quickly, is always important. That's why I mentioned a project by project basis, because we're always looking at things in a different manner. Not every, there's no one size fits all for each project, and we don't put 100% into sustainability and pay 5 times the odds for it, if that makes sense. We make as a decision, and this document here is purely a strategy document to pass that forward. It's not going any further into that. So every project, depending on the level of the project, the value of the project, would have a portfolio holder involvement, member involvement where it was required.
Thank you. Going to Councillor Cantwell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for presenting this strategy. I just had 2 questions on page 61, which is page 9 of your strategy. At the top of the page, you say assist with identifying and creating risk registers for projects with the value of £85,000. Is there a reason that amount was specified? Is that, best practice? What's done for projects under £85,000? Will you still assist with creating a register for them if asked?
So the reason for the £85,000 is, as part of the contract procedure rules thresholds, £85,000 is the open tender limit, is where that begins. So that's the reason for that threshold there. And yes, if we were to be involved in something, we thought there was a remit for there to be a risk register, because say it was politically sensitive or another reason, we would recommend a risk register was created for that project too. I want to say project by project again, but I'm not going to say it, sorry.
Thank you. And my second one was a bit further down, you specify keeping these updated with the relevant persons. I just wanted clarification. Would you see the portfolio holder, elected members, as relevant people? And furthermore, just like we have independent members for this committee, would you think an independent member for procurement outside of the council, outside of the partnership, would be advisable for procurement? What's your thoughts on that one as well?
Sorry, it took me a while to find with the relevant persons. Yep, got it. So yes, relevant persons would be key stakeholders within the project. That would often be a yes, a portfolio holder. I've got close relationships with the finance portfolio holders across the 3 councils because they've got procurement within their remit. And your second question was, sorry?
I was just making the point that just as this committee has 2 independent members who are completely independent of the council, no connection to party or anything, would you advise having a similar member for procurement? Is that something that you would think would work in this instance, just to make sure that there's always that independent person there?
I'm going to come in there. I don't think that sort of thing is what you would want an independent person to come in to start looking at people's purchasing. When you've got professional people there doing the job, I think that'd be something I would totally disagree with, but that's in my personal opinion. We've got professional people who are, institute members probably of the logistics, purchasing, and whatever. And I just wonder that you get independent people to come and sit in and watch what they're doing. It's not quite the sort of done thing. I don't think that's in my personal view. Martin, what's your view?
We as in PSPS are an external service provider to the client council. So whilst we're not, yes, independent, we are fully qualified and provide the best value advice each and every time. I wouldn't recommend that there was any additional scrutiny to. We've got lots of layers of bureaucracy in public sector as it is, and I think that works well. I just wouldn't want to go any further.
I think that's the question is irrelevant, to be honest, and I think the answer is well defined there. So I think we'll leave that one. Do you want anything else you want to add?
No, that was it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gleeson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I welcome this. It sets out clearly the processes we will use, it's well written and understandable by us. When I was previously on the council, I was involved in a project getting play equipment for BTAC parks, yeah. And at that stage, we had outsourced this to another council somewhere else, and it was awful.
It was in Norfolk somewhere.
Well, yeah, it most likely could well be. Yeah, that would make sense. No, so I think this is so much clearer, and actually having professionals readily available to us, I'm certain we will get better deals and see the savings by scale as well, working across the 3 councils. So I think it's really good.
Thank
And,
you.
oh, and finally, I'm pleased they took on board the 2 suggestions from scrutiny.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gleeson. Did you want to speak, Councillor Austin?
Mr. Chairman, can we be sure that council bureaucracy and council speak isn't discouraging some of our local smaller suppliers giving us the best deal? I think I've come across a case in the past where I found this to be the case, and I would like to think that we're getting much better at encouraging in the right way local suppliers to engage in the system.
Yes, I agree with you on that point there. You speak first, Martin, and I'll add my 10 pence worth in a minute.
Thank you, and I fully agree that council bureaucracy and speak, especially in public procurement, is notoriously or can be notoriously difficult. And I've seen historically other councils, because I was just doing some comparisons, and their tender documents are hundreds of pages long on some things that are maybe worth £30,000, £50,000, £40,000, something around that value, and it's just too much for a local supplier who, they're absolutely stacked out as it is, really busy, and they want to try and get in with their local authority. They just imagine they have a look at that document. If I was them, I'd look at it, see it was 100 pages, and I'd just close the document back down. I wouldn't even look. So what we're trying to do, and I hope it shows on here, is we're trying to simplify the process where we can to make it as simple as possible. Remove the duplication from documents, because that's a big thing that we noticed, that hence the 100 pages. I did a trial of one because that's who I am, obviously, and that 100 pages went down to 50 pages just by getting rid of duplication. They just say the same thing 3 or 4 times. So there's definitely ways we're looking to do that. And I think I mentioned scrutiny, I believe it was Boston Scrutiny, that one thing we're really looking to do with the local suppliers is to kind of look into down tools as such within a department, the 1 day a month, or if it works better than that, maybe more often or not as frequent. So 1 day a month or 1 day every other month. And we're looking to kind of go out to local suppliers, but to where they are, to their offices, because we've tried it at our offices before, and we've got swanky technology and it works really well. And then they go back to their offices and it just doesn't work in the same manner. So it's kind of giving them the time of day to myth bust as such, and show them, oh, but we thought you had to do this, this, and this to jump through these hurdles. No, it's an open process, and you can do this, just to try and make things as simple as possible. That won't be done overnight, but it's something I'm quite passionate about.
Thank you. You're quite right there. I think if you're going to engage with local businesses, and probably the smaller businesses as well, you've got to go out and you've got to mix, and you've got to communicate, you've got to engage, and you've got to get them on your side. And I think to bamboozle people with 1,000-page documents, triplicate probably rather than duplicate, is not the way to do it. And I think if this organisation is serious about getting this procurement strategy right, it's about visiting, meeting people, and talking about simplicity, about working with the council, how to be a supplier to the council. I think that's what you're trying to say. I've got a couple of questions for you, Martin, if you don't mind. On page 47, I'm a bit of a stickler about, whilst delivering an excellent service, I'd like to know how you clarify an excellent service, because I'm one that's always wanting to do excellent service, and I'll probably get 99% of it right, but not the 100%. So how do you clarify the excellent service? What do you mean?
Good question. So, yeah, so excellent service to me is what we offer is quick response times, knowledgeable on our sector, which is very much so, and just being there for the, supporting and advising that client officer, whomever that may be, through the journey to make it as simple as possible for them. That journey is, to me as a procurement professional, not too difficult. But if I had to go and do, I don't know, go into someone else's shoes, like housing, treasury, let's look at. I was looking at that report, I've got no idea. So yeah,
I'll give you one just to add to your list. Going above and beyond the client's expectations. Put that on your list as well. That's what I would say is excellent customer service.
Perfect.
Right. The other question I want to just ask you is, are all the people working on this procurement department, are they all qualified people, institute of this, institute of that? Are there people that actually know how to negotiate and deal with, purchasing, and are they good buyers, and are they good at that sort of thing? How qualified are all these people working this operation?
Yep. So we've got a team of 7, and it's a real mix actually. So myself, I'm fully qualified and I've got a real public sector background, and then we've got a procurement manager who is partially qualified up to a certain level and is now going to continue her qualifications with PSPS, and she's from a private sector background, but they were a bit of a quango, so they had some public sector tenders as well. The senior procurement officer, very much similar. They'd worked in a care home, but also in some warehousing, so private sector / a bit of public. And they've, again, got through and they've got one more year of their qualification to do. The 2 procurement officers aren't qualified. One has worked in the fresh produce industry for years and years.
I think you've given me enough information.
Fine.
There. I'm happy with that. I think if we're going any more, I shall apply for a job myself. The last thing I want to say to you is I'm concerned about protectionism for the council and dealing with suppliers. If companies go bust on us, or if companies don't deliver, I mean, what protectionism have we got in place to make sure that we are well protected against losing money, not finishing a contract or whatever?
So we undertake due diligence checks at the start to see if the company's kind of financially sound, and then throughout the contract we'll also do relevant checks, such as what's called credit safe is what we've got, so a credit checking agency, and we've got the rights to be able to monitor that. So for some of our key suppliers we monitor, and it sends us an email or alert when the score goes up or down. So that's one reason from a financial perspective. Other than that, we'll also undertake contract management meetings regularly. So that will include a discussion about obviously performance and kind of all the way through. But what we're looking to find from those meetings is we don't want surprises in a couple of months' time or in 6 months' time. We want to know and be aware of things so we can deal with them.
So it's tight management, tight checks, tight controls, ticking all the boxes and making sure nothing goes astray. Yeah. Lovely. That's what we like to hear. Thank you. Any more questions before we move on? Councillor Gleeson.
Just a quick comment. I'm wondering whether you might be able to help LHP with their grass cutting contract.
I doubt it. Martin, you're not going to do LHP's grass cutting, are you? Thank you. Councillor Gilbert.
Yeah, this is a very well written report, so thank you for putting it together. It's very readable, and as you said earlier on, it avoids duplication. It avoids saying the same thing twice. One of the things I have noticed since I've been back on the council is that some of the reports we get to read say the same thing twice. Sometimes they say the same thing 3 times. So you've managed to avoid that, so thank you very much.
Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, it's a good report. I'm very happy, the strategic plans and everything, and if it works, it will work. The only thing which is worrying me, and that's from my experience in this council, is the exemption order, because it happens before that something the council want to purchase, and then they put it on exemption order signed by, I think, my colleague right here, I think the monitoring officer. So it gives them that force to go and purchase anything they want in a quick response. And that's what worries me. I mean, how far the procurement will protect, this behavior from happening again, because it happens and we spend a lot of money and it wasn't worth it.
So the exemptions process has changed since PSPS have come into play, and we've worked with the council to get the contract procedurals updated and actually aligned across the 3 councils. And that included quite a big change to the exemptions process, which has made that a more scrutinised process. So kind of just really briefly saying the process. So an exemption form will come through to myself or the procurement team. We'll kind of review it, ask the questions, do a bit of back and forth with whomever sent it to us. We'll then put our procurement comment in saying, yes, we approve this, or no, we don't, and some reasons behind. We then send it through to Section 151, Christine for sign off and approval, the Chief Executive, so Rob Barlow as well. And then it's actually two councillors need to sign as well. So the portfolio holder for finance always, then the portfolio holder for the relevant area.
It seems like it goes down the houses, down the alleyways and every little nook and corner. So we're quite happy with that. Thank you very much, Martin. I'm going to move on now because I think we've done enough on this one.
Just a small one.
Very quick one, then that's it.
Do you have a time limit on that?
No. So obviously, one of the exemption clauses is urgency. So if it came through to us, then we would action it quickly, and that's what we do anyway with our excellent service. So.
Let's say that I'm very pleased we've got this procurement strategy, because anybody who hasn't got one, I think it's a free for all, and I think that's where the problems lie. People buying things, not quite sure what they're doing with it and how and when, and forget all the bits and pieces, forgot not to do the I's and T's and all that sort of thing. So first of all, well done. Well done for presenting it. I think you've taken all the comments in from all the people around the table, so that's even better. And are we just noting this? Everybody happy? Right, we'll move on. Thank you very much, Martin. Let's move on to item 4. Is the work programme. Starts on page 69. Are there any comments on this, please? Councillor Gleeson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got something I would like maybe adding to the work programme we're looking at. At the moment, we have on our website a council tax support scheme consultation, which is part of the process of us preparing our budget for next year. The document there is, well, I can't think of a polite word really. It isn't actually laying out the true facts of council tax support. It says that the maximum support available to working age applicants is 75%. That is not the case. The maximum amount available to working age people is 100%. And if you look at Lincoln District Council or Lincoln City Council and another council in this county, you see they do offer that. So we're consulting on this, and we're giving people the wrong information. And then when you go down to the actual options you've got, is agreeing with it or just saying no. To my mind, it's not a particularly good consultation. So I wonder whether we could have something added to our work programme where we look at the way we consult and how those are reported back. Because this just isn't true what it's saying.
It's a very interesting word, consultation. I think I agree with you on that one. I'll let Christine answer your question for you.
That's a matter for scrutiny, Chairman, in that obviously you may wish to ask scrutiny to consider how we undertake consultation processes, for example, and how many you've got and who leads on them, etc. In terms of the point you're raising, which is within the detail of the consultation, for this authority, it is 75%. However, that's in the wording of the consultation, but just from a point of factual accuracy, it is correct for Boston. It doesn't mean it is the maximum, because indeed the maximum could be 100%, and it's for each authority to decide what its council tax support scheme is. There is a decision by the portfolio holder that is available for you to similarly scrutinise as part of that consideration. And I'm sure the team at PSPS will be pleased to come and speak scrutiny in a bit more detail about this particular area in due course.
That was an interesting reply, Councillor Gleeson. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. What it actually says is the maximum support available to working age applicants is 75%. Nowhere does it say in Boston. Yeah, Boston has a poor history of the way it has done council tax support, which I won't go into now because it would bore you. But I will do it a full council sometime soon.
Okay.
Yeah, so it doesn't say in Boston. I think it should say the maximum available in Boston is 75%.
Is that
Within 2 districts in Lincolnshire, people can get 100%. But the reason we don't do it here is because it would take a lot of money from Lincoln and bring the money and leave the money in the pockets of the people in Boston. We send nearly £2 million we don't need to send to Lincoln County Council every year, rather than leaving it in the pockets of the people in Boston. Lincolnshire County Council. Yeah.
We will take that up somewhere at the scrutiny, as Christine suggested. Are there any other items for the work programme? If not, we can move on. Looking at November, it's going to be quite a big session, so we'll make sure that we try and get through them as quickly as possible, but we still have the detail to go through and the questions to ask, but November's looking quite big. Anybody else want to mention anything on there? Can we go on to the next item? Happy? Move on. Let's move on then. Right. Item 5, I'm going to talk about the co-opted independent member appointment. As you remember, at the council, they agreed that we could have 2 lay members, but I'm going to ask John Medler to present that to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. You've actually got at item 5, the exempt information, because the report contains information about the interview process. If members do want to ask questions about that, I would advise that you vote to go into exempt session so that you can then discuss that. If members don't want to talk about the detail in the appendix, then we won't have to go into exempt session, but I suspect members may wish to ask some questions about it, Chairman. Thank you.
So shall we do that then? Shall we go into an exempt session? I move that we go into an exempt session to discuss the co-opted independent member appointment.
If you don't move it that way, you're not in the exempt session.
Okay, I'll find the wording for you. Right, I move to consider excluding the press and public from the meeting for the following item of business under section 100 brackets A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972 on the grounds that if they were present, they could be disclosed to them exempt information as defined in paragraph 1 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act as amended. Is that the correct terminology? Does everybody agree to that?
I second that one.
Yeah, seconded by Councillor Danny, and I'll propose it. Okay. Happy? All in favour? So we come out of the committee meeting, and we're just going on to close down. So if you just bear with us for a moment.